You're not here right now. Your eyes are open. Your body is in a chair. But your mind left a long time ago. It went somewhere else. A conversation from last week you keep replaying. A problem that hasn't happened yet but already feels real. Something you should have said 3 days ago. Something you're terrified of saying tomorrow. You're physically still and mentally running at full speed. Here is what nobody tells you. You have been doing this your entire life, and so has every human being who ever lived. Ancient civilizations noticed this thousands of years ago. Not one civilization, not two. Every major society on Earth, independently, without contact with each other, arrived at the same disturbing observation about the human mind, and they all believed it was the source of almost all human suffering. What they found and what they tried to do about it is one of the most important things ever written down, and almost nobody talks about it anymore. To understand the power of now, you have to go back thousands of years, back to when humans first started asking a question that no animal before them had ever asked. Why is my mind never quiet? Why does having everything still feel like something is missing? Why do I keep living inside moments that are already gone or moments that haven't arrived? Every great civilization eventually asked these questions. The Egyptians, the Greeks, the Indians, the Chinese, the Romans, separated by oceans, by language, by centuries, and every single one of them arrived at the same answer. The answer was not a god, it was not a law or a weapon or a conquest, it was a moment. Specifically this one, the one you are in right now. In India, around 500 BC, a prince named Siddhartha Gautama walked away from a palace. He had everything a human being could want: food, safety, wealth, love, comfort, everything except one thing: peace of mind. He left because he had noticed something that no amount of luxury could fix. His mind refused to be where his body was. Even surrounded by beauty and abundance, it kept drifting back into the past, forward into the future, restless, unsatisfied, always somewhere else. So he gave everything up to understand why. He walked into the forest and sat down under a Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya in northern India, and he made a decision. He would not move until he understood what was wrong with the human mind. He sat through storms. He sat through hunger. He sat through doubt, through fear, through every distraction his own mind threw at him. And eventually something shifted. What he concluded became one of the most studied philosophies in human history. The mind, he said, is like a drunk monkey that has been stung by a bee. It swings from branch to branch, from past to future, from regret to anxiety without ever stopping, without ever resting in what is directly in front of it. Most people, he said, do not live their lives. They live inside a story about their lives, a story made entirely of memories and predictions, and they mistake that story for reality. Researchers at Harvard University tested this in 2010. They built a smartphone app that pinged 2,250 adults at random moments throughout the day. At every ping, two questions appeared on screen. What are you doing right now? And is your mind actually on what you are doing? 47% of the time, people's minds were somewhere else entirely, not on the task in front of them, not in the room they were sitting in, living inside thoughts about a past that was already over or a future that had not yet arrived. And the second finding was darker. People were significantly less happy during mind-wandering moments. It did not matter what they were doing. A wandering mind was an unhappy mind. Every single time? No exceptions. Siddhartha observed this 2,500 years before the study, without a single instrument, without a single research subject, just by watching his own mind long enough to see the pattern. But Buddhism was not alone in making this discovery. On the other side of the world, the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece and Rome were arriving at the same conclusion using completely different methods. Marcus Aurelius was emperor of Rome. He commanded the largest army on earth. He controlled more land, more people, and more resources than almost any human being in history. And in his private journal, a journal he never intended anyone to read, he wrote a single instruction to himself: confine yourself to the present. He wrote it as a reminder because he kept forgetting. Even an emperor with every advisor and every resource available to him could not stop his own mind from drifting into worry and regret. He needed to write it down to believe it. The Stoics built an entire philosophy around this problem. They were methodical about it. They mapped out exactly where human suffering came from. And what they found was this: the past is fixed. You cannot change a single second of it. The future is uncertain. The only thing that has ever truly belonged to you, the only place where you have ever had any real power, is right now. Every hour spent living in the past is an hour spent in a place that no longer exists. Every hour spent living in the future is an hour spent in a place that may never exist. The Stoics called this a form of self-imposed exile from your own life, and here is where it gets stranger. Across the Pacific Ocean, ancient Chinese Taoist philosophers had been teaching the same idea for centuries under a different name: effortless presence, moving with what is not with what was, was or what might be. The Taoists spent years observing nature, rivers, wind, seasons, animals, and they noticed one consistent pattern. Nature never argues with the present moment. A river does not pause to mourn the rock it already passed. It does not slow down to worry about the waterfall ahead. It moves completely, without resistance, without memory, without anticipation. But humans resist, constantly and relentlessly. Your ancestors believed that this resistance, the internal argument with what is already happening, was the true cause of suffering. Not the difficult event itself, not the loss or the failure or the pain, but the refusal to accept that it is already real. The mind's insistence that things should be different than they are. That insistence, the Taoists said, is what breaks people, not life. The argument with life. So what did the ancient world actually do about this? The Spartans had the most extreme answer in recorded history. From the age of 7, Spartan children were taken from their families, removed from warm homes, separated from their mothers, placed into a state training system called the agoge. No comfort, no warmth, no certainty about what came next. They slept outside. They went hungry deliberately. They were made to solve problems with no help and no guarantee of survival. Most people assume this was about building physical strength. It was not. Every civilization in the ancient world trained soldiers for physical strength. The Spartans were training for something rarer and more difficult. They were training the mind to exist only in the present moment. A soldier whose mind drifted to his family during battle was a dead soldier. A soldier lying awake, worrying about tomorrow's march, instead of managing tonight's cold, did not survive tonight's cold. Presence was not philosophy for the Spartans. It was not a spiritual practice or an intellectual exercise. It was a survival arithmetic, simple and absolute. You are either here or you are gone. And modern science has confirmed what the Spartans built through brutal trial and error. Researchers studying elite special forces units found that these soldiers showed dramatically lower activity in the brain's default mode network during high-stress operations. The default mode network is the part of your brain responsible for mind wandering, for replaying the past, for simulating the future, for the endless internal monologue most people live inside every waking hour. Elite soldiers do not suppress this through willpower in the moment. They have trained it into near silence through thousands of hours of present moment pressure over years and years. The Spartans understood this without neuroscience, without brain imaging, without research labs. They discovered it by throwing 7-year-old children into the dark and the cold and watching what came back. Right now, your brain's default mode network is active. It switches on the moment you are not fully engaged with something directly in front of you. Scientists once believed this network served no real function. They assumed it was background noise, idle processing, nothing important. They were wrong. It is replaying your past conversations. It is running simulations of future threats. It is constructing and updating a continuous story about who you are, what people think of you, and whether you are safe. It runs almost every moment you are not actively focused. And for most people, that is most of their lives. Every ancient civilization that seriously studied the human mind independently concluded the same thing about this mental pattern. Thousands of years before it had a scientific name. The Buddhists called it the wandering mind. The Stoics called it false judgment, placing your attention on things outside your control. The Taoists called it resistance fighting the current instead of moving with it. 3 different languages, 3 different continents, 3 different centuries, all pointing at the same pattern inside the same human mind. The present moment is the only place your life is actually happening, and most humans spend the majority of their lives somewhere else. Every civilization that ever rose and eventually fell had people in it who forgot to be present. Emperors who spent entire reigns anxious about futures that never arrived the way they imagined. Generals who were still fighting wars that had been over for years. Ordinary people who were given full, complete lives and spent them almost entirely inside their own heads. And every civilization also had a small number of people who figured something out, who sat still long enough or suffered enough, or thought deeply enough to notice something most people never notice, that the past only exists as a thought, that the future only exists as a thought, and that a thought, no matter how vivid, no matter how convincing, is not the same as what is actually in front of you. The only moment that has ever been real is the one you are in right now, not the one you are replaying, not the one you are afraid of, this one. Siddhartha Siddhartha understood this under a tree in India 2,500 years ago. Marcus Aurelius wrote it to himself in a candlelit tent on the edge of a war. A 7-year-old Spartan child felt it in the cold and the dark and the hunger and came back the next morning. And now you have heard it, which means the message made it. Across thousands of years, across dozens of languages, through the rise and collapse of every empire that has ever existed on this planet, the same message survived all of it. Be here.